From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! We turn to the latest now in the U.S. attorney firing scandal. Nearly half of the U.S. attorneys slated for removal by the Bush administration last year were targeted for not doing enough to prosecute voter fraud. According to the Washington Post, of the 12 U.S. attorneys known to have been dismissed or considered for removal last year, 5 were identified by presidential advisor Karl Rove or other administration officials as working in districts that were trouble spots for voter fraud: Kansas City, Milwaukee, New Mexico, Nevada, and Washington State. 4 of the 5 prosecutors in those districts were fired. Perhaps the most well-known of these U.S. attorneys is ousted New Mexico prosecutor David Inglesias. His case has been at the center of the political firestorm. Investigative journalist Greg Palast has been closely following this story. He files this report.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask for a recess.
I'd like an answer to the question, Judge.
The court will wait for an answer.
This past December 7th was not the first time United States prosecutor David Inglesias had been brutally cut loose.
Object! And when it went bad, you cut these guys loose!
In the 1992 film, A Few Good Men, Tom Cruise plays David Inglesias, the true story of the young military defense lawyer fighting to uncover the truth.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Greg Palast.
Greg, hi, David Inglesias.
Hey, how are you, Captain?
Hey, I'm doing just fine, thank you.
So can you handle the truth or not?
Absolutely.
Captain Inglesias, the U.S. prosecutor, knew something was very wrong when, just a week before the 2006 midterm elections, he received a strange and threatening call to his home. It was his state's senior senator, the powerful Republican leader Pete Domenici, on the line, pushing Inglesias to file criminal charges against a Democrat before the election.
Sitting in my bedroom, and here's the killer point, Greg. He says, are these going to get filed before November? And I said, I didn't think so, and the line goes dead. In other words, our senior senator hung up on me. A terribly inappropriate call.
Inappropriate, certainly. Obstruction of justice, possibly.
He basically wanted to know, are you going to file these cases that can help Heather out? That was the subtext. I felt terrible after that phone call.
By helping Heather, he meant Congresswoman Heather Wilson, then candidate Heather Wilson. The race was a dead heat. Domenici wanted him to bust a Democrat to help Wilson. Still, Inglesias tried to be the loyal party man, even covering up the threatening call.
Did you report this phone call to anyone at the time?
I did not, and I should have. There's a requirement under the U.S. Attorney's Manual for us to report that kind of contact from a member of Congress. I didn't do that.
But that act of loyalty wasn't good enough for Karl Rove, the president's political advisor. Rove flew to New Mexico just before the election and got an earful of complaints about Inglesias from state party chiefs. Rove reported to President Bush, who personally put the heat on Attorney General Gonzalez. Inglesias was stunned.
I had no idea that a few local yokels in New Mexico would have enough stroke to get the president to complain.
There was more than failing to help the Wilson campaign. In the 2004 presidential election, Republican operatives blocked 250,000 new voters nationwide from voting on grounds they brought the wrong IDs to the polls. To justify this massive blockade, Republican officials wanted Inglesias to arrest some voters to create a high-publicity show trial. Inglesias went along with the game. Just before the 2004 election, he held a press conference announcing the creation of a vote fraud task force. But the prosecutor drew the line at arresting innocent voters.
They were telling Rove that I wasn't doing their bidding. I wasn't filing these voter fraud cases.
The evidence fellow Republicans gave him was junk. He refused to bring a single prosecution.
It was the old throwing pasta at the wall trick, that if you throw enough pasta, something's got to stick, and it didn't.
For failing to bring the voting cases, Inglesias paid with his job.
They wanted a political operative who happened to be a U.S. attorney, and when they got somebody who actually took his oath to the Constitution seriously, they were appalled, and they wanted me out of there. The 2 strikes against me was I was not political. I didn't help them out on their bogus voter fraud prosecutions.
Rove personally ordered his removal. As a prosecutor, Inglesias says that if missing emails prove the firing was punishment for failure to bring bogus charges, Mr. Rove himself is in legal trouble.
If his intent was, look, we're unhappy with Inglesias, if that was his intent, he's in big trouble. That is obstruction of justice. Well, what classic example?
Inglesias believes the real reasons for the firings are in what are called the missing emails, emails sent by the Rove team using Republican Party campaign computers, which Rove claims can't be retrieved.
But not all the missing emails are missing. We have 500 of them. Apparently the Rove team misaddressed their emails, and late one night, they all ended up in our inboxes in our offices in New York City.
And as Inglesias predicted, they reveal a story the party would rather keep buried. Voting rights attorney Robert F. Kennedy Jr. reviewed the evidence in our cache of emails and concluded
they ought to be in jail for doing this because they knew it was illegal and they did it anyway.
What is it that was so obviously illegal that law professor Kennedy thought they deserved prison time? The evidence that shook him was attached to 50 of the secret emails, something the GOP party chiefs called caging lists. Thousands of names of voters. Notably, the majority were African American. Kennedy explained how caging worked.
Caging is an illegal way of getting rid of black votes. You get a list of all the black voters, then you send a letter to their homes, and if the person doesn't sign it at the homes, the letter then is returned to the Republican National Committee. They then direct the state attorney general, who's friendly to them, who's Republican, to remove that voter from the list on the alleged basis that that voter does not live in the address that they designated as their address on the voting application form.
In all, the Republican Party challenged nearly 3 million voters, a mass attack on minority voting rights virtually unreported in the U.S. press.
So they disenfranchise millions of black voters who don't even know that they've been disenfranchised.
Page after page of voters with this address: Naval Air Station, Jacksonville. Hundreds, thousands of soldiers and sailors targeted to lose their vote. Go to Baghdad, lose your vote. And what does this have to do with the prosecutor firings? Take a look at the name at the top of the secret missing email. Tim Griffin. This is the man in charge of the allegedly illegal caging operation. He's research director for the Republican National Committee, special assistant to Karl Rove, and as of December 7th, Karl Rove's personal pick for U.S. Attorney for the state of Arkansas. Is this a case of the perpetrator becomes the prosecutor? For Democracy Now!, this is Greg Palast.
We use words like honor, code, loyalty.
Is Tom Cruise going to play you in this follow-up?
He's more handsome, but I'm quite a bit taller, so I've got that on him.
And that was that excerpt of A Few Good Men from Greg Palast's piece. Greg Palast, investigative journalist, his latest book just out in paperback called Our Madhouse from Baghdad to New Orleans' Sordid Secrets.